I secretly knew my husband was cheating for months, so I threw him a huge welcome home party, exposed his affair in front of everyone. I'm 28 years old, and I've been married to Derek, who's 30, for the past 3 years. Before that, we were together for another 3 years, so altogether, we've been a couple for nearly 6 years now. We first met through some mutual friends, and from the get-go, we just clicked. Up until recently, I'd say our relationship was solid. I never had any reason to believe he was unhappy with me. But over the past couple of months, things have started to feel off. It all began earlier this year when Derek accepted a job out of state. We live in Alaska, but about 10 months ago, he told me he had landed a big project in Pennsylvania. The kicker? He only mentioned it a week before he was set to leave. That's when he admitted that he had already accepted the job, signed all the necessary paperwork, and deliberately kept it from me until the last minute. His reasoning? Well, a few years back, during our second year together, we had to do long distance for about 3 months. His grandmother had fallen seriously ill, and his entire family flew out to London to be with her during her final days. He originally told me he'd be gone for a week, but that week stretched into 3 long months. It was hard on both of us, and I won't lie, I struggled with it. But that was then, and this was now. We weren't just dating anymore, we were married. I felt like, at the very least, he should have talked to me about it before making such a big decision. And it's not like I would have told him not to go. If this was a huge career move for him, of course I would have supported it. The only thing I wanted was to be included in the conversation. But I didn't want to turn it into a fight right before he left, so I kept my feelings to myself. I didn't tell him how much it hurt, how disappointed I was. Instead, I spent that last week trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'd be on my own for the next 10 months. I know I'm a grown woman and should be able to handle things like this, but still, the idea of suddenly living alone was daunting. Even though I was struggling internally, I made sure to send him off with a smile. I didn't want him to feel guilty or worry about how I'd cope while he was gone. But the truth was, adjusting wasn't easy, especially because I hadn't been given any time to mentally prepare for it. If he had told me sooner, I could have processed it better. Eventually, though, I found my rhythm and settled into living by myself. At first, we talked on the phone almost every day, which helped. But then, after a few months, something shifted. Around the 3-month mark, Derek started acting distant. Our calls became less frequent, and when I messaged him, he'd leave me on read for hours. I had no idea what was going on, and every time I tried to bring it up, he brushed it off, saying he was just swamped with work and exhausted. Then, when he finally came to visit me in the 4th month, I expected things to get better, but they didn't. Even though he was physically there with me for 2 days, it felt like his mind was somewhere else. Half the time, he was glued to his phone, and that stung. I had hoped that after his visit, things would start improving, but they only got worse. By the 6-month mark, I couldn't take it anymore. I called him up and told him outright that I felt pushed aside. I thought he'd care, that he'd at least try to understand where I was coming from, but instead, we got into a huge argument. He accused me of being insecure and needy, saying this was exactly why he hadn't told me about the job sooner. According to him, he knew I'd freak out and act the same way I did the last time we had to do long distance. That wasn't fair. The last time we were apart, it wasn't just me struggling, we were both having a hard time. On top of that, with him being in England, the time difference made things even tougher. So for him to make it sound like I was the only one who had issues back then? That hurt. After that fight, I decided I wasn't going to keep putting in all the effort. I was exhausted emotionally and mentally. Then, 2 weeks later, out of the blue, Derek showed up to visit me again. We managed to work things out, and for a little while, I actually thought we were getting back on track. But after he left, something happened that completely blindsided me. A friend reached out with news that shook me to my core. A friend of mine reached out one day with something that turned my whole world upside down. She had caught Derek cheating. And she had proof. She had been visiting her husband's family in Pennsylvania when, by sheer chance, she spotted Derek at a restaurant. But he wasn't alone. He was cozied up in a booth with another woman, practically snuggling with her right there in public. Thankfully, he never noticed her, so she was able to discreetly snap a few photos. When she sent them to me, there was no room for doubt Derek was having an affair. At first, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. Seeing those pictures felt surreal, like I had stepped into some kind of twisted alternate reality. I called my friend right away, hoping for some kind of explanation that might make it all make sense. But there was none. She confirmed what I was seeing with my own 2 eyes. I was devastated, but also in complete denial. For days, I just couldn't accept that this was real. I thought about confronting Derek, but deep down, I knew exactly how that would go. He'd deny it. He'd gaslight me, spin some story, maybe even make me feel like I was crazy for believing it. And what would be the point of that? So instead, I shut down. I could barely function. I didn't go to work, I didn't tell a soul. I felt humiliated, even though I was the one who had been betrayed. Somehow, I carried this shame as if it was my own failure. But after nearly 2 weeks of mourning my marriage, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this break me. If Derek had already moved on in secret, then so would I. During those 2 weeks, every time he texted me, I played along like nothing was wrong. He wasn't calling me anymore, and even his messages felt more like an obligation than anything heartfelt. But now, I understood why. Honestly, I was grateful he didn't call. If I had heard his voice, I might have cracked and confronted him before I was ready. Instead, I used that time wisely. I started untangling my life from his, step by step. First, I separated my finances. When he casually asked about it, I fed him some excuse about opening a new account at a different bank for better credit. He didn't question it. Then, I started packing. Within days, I had moved into a new apartment, but I kept up the illusion that I still lived in our old house. Whenever friends or family wanted to visit, I insisted on meeting them there so no one would get suspicious. Even the friend who had exposed Derek's affair, I asked her to keep quiet. She respected my wishes, and I appreciated that. For the next 6 months, I played my role perfectly. No one had any idea what I knew, not even Derek. But behind the scenes, I was planning something big. And last week, I finally got to pull it off. About 3 weeks ago, Derek texted me with good news. His project was finally wrapped up, and he'd be coming home. When I heard that, I was elated. Not because I missed him, but because it meant my plan could finally come to life. I immediately started preparing for what I told him would be a huge surprise to welcome him home. I insisted that as soon as he landed, he had to come straight to a hotel I had booked instead of going home. He resisted at first, saying he'd be exhausted from the flight, but I wouldn't take no for an answer. I made it sound like something special, something he'd regret missing. Eventually, he gave in. Then, I got to work. I invited everyone, his family, his friends, his co-workers. Even the ones who couldn't attend in person, I convinced to join over FaceTime, telling them this was important to me. I brought my own friends and family into the mix too, making sure there would be plenty of witnesses for what was about to unfold. Finally, the night arrived. The guests were already gathered at the hotel by the time Derek's flight landed. Since I had chosen a hotel close to the airport, we didn't have to wait long. When he walked through those doors, the room erupted in cheers. His family and friends rushed forward, hugging him, some even crying. The atmosphere was warm, full of love. It was the perfect setup. I was the last one to approach him. I wrapped my arms around him in a tight embrace and even kissed his cheek. Then, with a smile, I stepped back and began my speech. I talked about our years together, about how much we had been through, about the love we had shared. Derek stood there, grinning like a fool, completely unaware of what was coming. His face was full of that sweet, sentimental smile right up until the very end of my speech, when I dropped the bomb. I took a deep breath and announced to the entire room that, despite everything we had been through, despite all our years together, Derek had still chosen to betray me. The room went dead silent. Confusion spread across every face, including Derek's. He had no idea what was happening. But then, I gave him the answer. With a dramatic flourish, I unfurled the banners that lined the walls, massive, blown-up photographs of Derek and his mistress, caught red-handed in that Pennsylvania restaurant. The proof of his affair, displayed for everyone to see. I wasn't done yet. Right on cue, the waiters wheeled in a massive cake. Written in bold, decorative frosting were the words, "Welcome home, cheater." Yes, I've known about this for the past 6 months. I thought it was hilarious. Unfortunately, no one else seemed to share my sense of humor. The room turned painfully awkward. My friends and family, his co-workers, even his closest friends, all of them just stood there, stunned. Derek, for the first time in his life, was speechless. His face went pale as he stared at the evidence. When he finally managed to speak, his response was, well, predictable. He called me sick. Said I was deranged for pulling off something like this. Accused me of needing psychiatric help because, in his mind, only a crazy person could pretend to be fine for 6 months just to set up a revenge party. Then, without another word, he stormed out. His parents and most of his family followed right behind him, shooting me furious glares as they left. One by one, the rest of the guests trickled out too, most of them too uncomfortable to even say goodbye. But I didn't care. I had done what I set out to do. The only ones who stayed were a handful of my closest friends and family. They came over to comfort me, but honestly, I had no more tears left to cry. I just sat down and ate that cake with them because I had paid good money for it, and I wasn't about to let it go to waste. Once dinner was over, everyone headed home. And so did I. But not to the house I had once shared with Derek. That wasn't my home anymore. I went back to my own apartment. The one I had picked out for myself. The one where I would be starting over. It's been a week since the party, and the very next morning, I wasted no time, I filed for divorce. I didn't expect to hear from Derek, and honestly, I figured he wouldn't even contest it. But 2 days ago, when the divorce papers landed in his hands, he suddenly decided he had something to say. He sent me an email, not to apologize, but to let me know how disappointed he was in me. According to him, if I had found out about his affair, I should have had the decency to confront him privately instead of doing something so extreme and disturbing. He went on about how he hadn't been able to sleep or eat since the party, how the humiliation had completely ruined him. His own friends and family had turned their backs on him, and, of course, he blamed me for all of it. Apparently, I could have just kept quiet and dealt with this privately, but instead, I had aired our dirty laundry for the world to see. So, in Derek's mind, I wasn't the victim. He was. I didn't bother responding. I had already done what I needed to do. The party wasn't about revenge, it was about closure, about making sure that he couldn't lie his way out of this. Update 1. First off, I just want to say thank you. I had no idea that so many people would actually appreciate what I did, but seeing all the support has been really cool. Now that the dust has settled, reality is setting in. My marriage is actually over. And even though I made peace with that fact a long time ago, the finality of it all is just now sinking in. It feels strange, but not in a bad way. If anything, I feel free. My friends and family have been incredible. My parents check in on me every day, my friends constantly text just to make sure I'm doing okay. And I genuinely appreciate it. But what I don't understand is why Derek suddenly feels the need to check on me, too. After that last email, I blocked him everywhere. But now, he's gone out of his way to make a brand new social media account just to message me. And for some reason, I haven't blocked this one yet. I guess part of me is just curious to see where he's going with this. He keeps asking if I'm emotionally okay, and every message has the same theme: he's going to sign the divorce papers, but before he does, he wants to meet in person for one last conversation, for closure. According to him, after being together for so many years, we owe it to each other to talk. I don't know how to explain to him that after what he did, I don't owe him anything. So far, I've ignored him. But I won't lie, part of me is tempted to meet him. Just out of curiosity. I talked it over with my parents, and they think there's no need. What's there to discuss? He cheated. That's it. If it's about the divorce, we can deal with that through a mediator. There's no reason to meet him alone. But despite all the advice I've been given, I might still go through with it. Not because I have second thoughts about leaving him, but because I want to hear whatever ridiculous excuse he's been rehearsing. Nothing he says will change my mind, so really, what's the harm? Update 2. Okay, so I didn't actually meet him, but I did talk to him. It's been 2 weeks since I filed for divorce, and I just need him to sign the papers so we can move forward. That's it. To speed things up, I finally caved and sent him a message. I told him flat out that I had no interest in meeting in person, but if he really had something to say, he could call me. Just for that, I temporarily unblocked his number. If it was that urgent, he could say whatever he needed to over the phone, because I wasn't going to go out of my way just to see him. His response? He still pushed for an in-person meeting. That annoyed me. So I told him if he was going to be stubborn, I'd block this account too, and we'd be done. Within seconds, he backpedaled, saying he'd call. Funny how fast he changed his tune. When he finally did call, I expected excuses. But I wasn't prepared for this level of nonsense. He started off by saying he just wanted to apologize for everything. Then he admitted that he never intended for me to find out about his affair. As if that was the real problem, me finding out. Then he launched into his story. While he was living away, he had reconnected with an ex from high school. She lived in the same city, and at first, she kept asking him to meet up, but he had declined. Until, of course, he didn't. He said he had been lonely, that being away from me was too hard, and eventually, he caved. The first time he met up with her, he didn't plan to cheat, oh no, it just happened out of the blue. But after that first time, he couldn't stop. Not because he loved her, but because he needed someone to keep him company. To make the loneliness go away. Then came the kicker. Even when he was with her, even while he was sleeping with her, the person he really missed was me. Yes. That's what he said. He cheated because he missed me. And, of course, he started hinting that if I could just understand where he was coming from, maybe even try to forgive him, he'd be so grateful. Because, despite everything, he was still in love with me. While he was talking, I just sat there, speechless. Not because I was emotional, but because the sheer audacity of what he was saying was almost laughable. This man actually thought that this explanation was supposed to make me consider taking him back. The silence on my end must have made him nervous because he started rambling, trying to convince me that what he did wasn't as bad as I thought. That he never actually loved the other woman, that it was just a way to get through the loneliness. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But mostly, I just wanted to be done with this conversation. I don't know what kind of response he was expecting, but I can guarantee he didn't get it. Because I had nothing to say to him. There was nothing to say. The man had already made his bed. He just didn't like that I had flipped the mattress over in front of an audience. And that wasn't my problem. I let him talk. I listened to every pathetic excuse he had to offer, and when he finally went silent, I responded with a single word. Okay. Then, without giving him a chance to process it, I hung up. I think that was the perfect response because, honestly, that's exactly how I felt. He had said everything he wanted to say, and I had heard him out. Fair enough, right? But just because he still claimed to love me didn't mean I had to feel the same way. And if he really loved me, he wouldn't have cheated in the first place. It was a satisfying end to that conversation, and immediately after, I blocked him again. I didn't want to give him another opportunity to weasel his way back into my life. And I won't lie, I was proud of myself for handling it like that. No drama, no drawn-out confrontation. Just one word and complete silence. Afterward, I called up my friends to tell them what had happened, and we had a great laugh. I could only imagine how Derek had expected things to go, some deep heart-to-heart, maybe even a tearful conversation about what to do next. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, babe. Once a cheater, always a cheater. I don't owe you forgiveness, and I certainly don't owe you a second chance. The only thing I don't understand is why he was so desperate to get back with me in the first place. He looked pretty damn happy with the other girl in the pictures I had received. But, in the end, it doesn't matter. It's over. All I care about now is getting this divorce finalized. Update 3. It's been 3 days since that conversation, and today I got some news. Derek finally responded to the divorce petition. He's not contesting it, which is great. But there's one problem. He thinks he should get to keep the house. According to him, since I left, I shouldn't be taking anything with me. But that's not going to fly, because most of the decor, a good chunk of the furniture, and several expensive paintings and art installations in his house were actually mine. So, now, we have to meet with a mediator to sort this out. Honestly, I just want this to be over with as soon as possible. The past few months have been draining, and I'm done with the drama. In the meantime, I've been hearing some gossip. Apparently, Derek quit his job and moved back here. Some say he's trying to start a business, but now, with the divorce happening, all his plans have stalled, and he's pissed. Good for him. And good for me, too. Looking back, I'm so glad I never met with him in person. I know myself, I have a soft heart. If I had seen him face to face, it might not have been as easy to shut him down. I might have hesitated, maybe even softened a little. But I didn't, and I'm proud of that. Besides, unlike Derek, I don't have to worry about money. I just got a promotion at work, and honestly, it was exactly what I needed. To celebrate, I'm thinking about throwing a small get-together at my new place with my close friends. The last party wasn't exactly for fun, but this time, it's all about me and my fresh start. Why not celebrate my independence? Update 4. A couple of days ago, Derek and I finally met with the mediator. The meeting itself went smoothly enough, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. It's what happened after that meeting. As I was leaving, I spotted Derek's car parked a little way off. And standing next to it? The woman from the pictures, his ex, or I guess now, his current. She was glaring at me. I had no interest in dealing with her, so I kept my head down and walked straight to my car. But apparently, she had other plans. Just as I was getting in, she grabbed me by the arm and yanked me out. That pissed me off. I shoved her back and told her to get the hell away from me. But she wasn't done. She got in my face and spat out the most unoriginal insult I've ever heard, something about how she couldn't understand why Derek had ever been with me because I was as ugly as I was stupid. I rolled my eyes and was about to ignore her, but then she really crossed the line. She brought up my house party, the one I threw to celebrate my promotion, and accused me of partying while Derek was suffering. I almost laughed. She had no idea what she was talking about. That party had nothing to do with Derek. We didn't even mention him that night. But I guess in her head, everything revolves around him. I tried to walk away, but she wasn't finished. She shoved me. And that? That was her mistake. We got into it. I won't pretend it was some action movie brawl, but I did manage to leave a few scratches on her face before Derek had to jump in and pull us apart. She did get a slap in, though, I'll give her that. The real MVP in all of this? My lawyer, who had been standing nearby, and immediately called the police. When the cops arrived, I didn't hesitate. I pressed charges. There were plenty of witnesses, all of whom confirmed that she had been the aggressor. And as the officers escorted her away, I made sure to give her something to really think about. I leaned in just enough and said, "You might want to rethink defending a man who was still trying to get back with me up until a few days ago. If you want my leftovers, be my guest, but I wouldn't recommend it." Her face twisted with rage, but there was something else there too: confusion. She didn't know. Derek must not have told her that he had been begging for another chance. Too bad. The last thing I remember was Derek yelling at me, screaming that I had ruined his life. I didn't stick around to listen. I just got in my car and drove away. Whatever happens next? That's their problem now.